Hey, shalom, shalom from your Dutch Uncle John, here to tell you what it is from Kyrgyzstan still. And today we're going to talk about the letter Het, the 8th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The letter Het, its ancient picture is a wall or a fence. Okay, so keep that in mind. And I just want you to note that the Het is not the letter Hey. You can see they're very similar. Hey has the little open window. Nor is the letter Het the letter Tav. They are also very similar. Tav is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Tav is the covenant, right? And Tav has the little foot on the left side. There are 7,187 Hets in the Torah. It's not the by far the most used. Nor is it the least used. There is a cursive version of Het, and there it is. And Het, if you have Jewish friends, Hebrew-speaking friends, and you say something funny on the internet, you will usually get this as a response, and this is the ha 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 ha, like LOL, all right? Not a biblical message there, but just so you know. And because Het is the 8th letter, and 8 represents new beginnings. We've talked about this over and over, right? Here's some examples. The 8th day in a week begins a new week, right? You have 7 days. The 8th day is the new beginning, okay? There were 8 people on Noah's Ark. Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives. That is definitely a new beginning. Yahweh, Yud-He, Vav-He, he reaffirmed his covenant with Abraham 8 times. And here I've listed them for you. You can freeze the camera and look them up yourself, but I checked them out. They are 8 times. Abraham also had 8 sons, and God made this Abrahamic covenant with him. That's a new beginning, and that new beginning shows itself that Abraham had 8 sons, right? The covenant of circumcision, the Brit Milah, occurs on the 8th day. When a Jewish boy is born, on day 8 they do the circumcision. You oftentimes, if you watch television and movies, they call it a bris. And I've told you before that there are certain sects of Jews who pronounce the T sound at the end of a word as an S. You'll hear it in Shabbat. They'll say Shabbos. Or Brit, they'll call it a bris. So that's a covenant of circumcision. And that is a new beginning for the 8-year-old boy. Right? He's now been brought into the covenant. King David was Jesse's 8th son, all right, and the greatest king of Israel, except Yeshua, of course. And Yeshua, he rose on the 8th day. Okay, it was the first day of the week, but a first day of the week is an 8th day. Sukkot. Sukkot is the 7th Moedim. Remember the Moedim in Genesis 1:14 that God wanted all mankind to keep the appointed times when we are to meet with him. Sukkot is the last one. It's also called the Feast of Booths or the Feast of Tabernacles in the Christian Bibles. And that is an 8-day Moed. And it anticipates the Olam Haba, the world to come. There's a new beginning, okay? And musically, on the music scale, you have do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. There are 7 notes in the music scale, and then do is the 8th note. It's a new beginning. It's a new octave. So you see, 8 represents new beginnings all through the Bible. Another new beginning is, we talked about Abraham and his 8 sons. His second son, Yitzhak, Isaac, which means he will laugh. that is a new beginning, because the covenant that he made with Abraham, he continued it with Isaac and then Jacob and the Jewish people. But the name Yitzhak in Hebrew is a Yud, a Tzadi, a Chet, and a Kuf. And you'll notice Yitzhak has a Chet in the middle of his name, and showing that he is a new beginning. And what's kind of clever is the Tzadi on one side, its value is 90. The Kuf on the other side, its value is 100. And Abraham and Sarah were 190, respectively, whenever they had Yitzhak, a new beginning. Very nice that he hid the ages in there. And the new beginnings in this 8 concept, the 8 concept does not just stick in the Old Testament, it's in the New Testament too. Yeshua's name, in which we say Jesus, right? But in Greek, it's Iousis, okay? And if you put in the isopsophy for Jesus' name, Iousis, it adds up to 888. Jesus is that new covenant. There are 7 covenants in the Old Testament, and then Jeremiah 31:31 tells the Jews and tells all of us that a new covenant is coming, and that new covenant is going to be in Yeshua's blood. And it's no surprise that Yeshua's name in Greek adds up to 888. And not only does his name add up to 888, but different words and titles related to him are multiples of 8. Kurios is the Greek word for Lord, adds up to 800, which is 100 times 8. Messias, Messiah in Greek, adds up to 656, which is 82 times 8. Christos, Christ, which, by the way, means Messiah. Christ is the Greek word for Messiah. So when you say Jesus Christ, you're saying Yeshua HaMashiach. Jesus is Messiah. Yeshua is Messiah. But Christos adds up to 1480, which is 185 times 8. The word Savior, Soter, in Greek, adds up to 1408, which is 176 times 8. Jesus said, I am the way, Hodos, adds up to 344, which is 43 times 8. Aletheia is truth, adds up to 64, which is 8 times 8. I'm not sure how to pronounce this one. Huios is the word for son in Greek, and it adds up to 680, which is 85 times 8. And Huios Tov to Anthropos, Son of Man, which is the title given to the Messiah in the Old Testament and Yeshua in the New Testament, adds up to 2960, which is 370 times 8. The letter Het has no English equivalent. Okay, its sound is, we've put an H sound, a soft H in English, but it's not. It's a sound, comes from down here. Best examples is maybe in Scottish. They have Loch Ness, or Loch Lomond. That is the sound, okay? Or in German, Achtung. That Spanish, Jorge. In Hebrew, chutzpah. He's got some audacity, some chutzpah there, okay? Now, the letter Het is actually made up of the 2 previous letters, the Vav and the Zayin. Okay, you can see the 2 of them go together, forming a Het. And if you remember, Vav's number is 6. Vav represents man. Man was created on day 6. Antichrist is a bad, bad man. His number is 666. And the Zayin, it is actually a Vav with a crown on top of it, representing Yeshua. Okay? And you put these 2 together, you yoke them together, it reminds me of Matthew 11, 29 and 30, where Jesus says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Very nice picture there, how he wants to yoke himself with us. Okay, very good. And if we look at the Hebrew alphabet so far, we started with Aleph. Aleph is God. We've told you this 100 times. Okay, and God comes to earth in the form of Yeshua, Jesus, right? Which is the Bet, the house. Yeshua is the house that God lives in on earth. And that Bet, it looks like a house. There's a floor, there's a wall, there's a ceiling, and there's an opening. And from that opening is sent the Gimel, the Holy Spirit. And the Gimel goes up to the Dalet, the door, and knocks on the door. And if you open the door, hey, behold, blessings, revelations are going to be coming. And great things, blessings will be coming. For example, you have the Vav and the Zayin underneath a Chet. Okay? Well, this is the union, the marriage of the man, Vav, and the Zayin, the Messiah. This is the whole plan of God, right? The Holy Spirit is sent out to find a bride for the Son. Okay, so there's going to be a marriage. And if you've ever seen Jewish weddings, you know the Jews get married under what's called a chuppah. And chuppah begins with a chet. Here's a picture of the giant chet. Right, the chuppah is usually 4 poles with a canopy over them. Okay, and they go inside this thing. The chuppah, it kind of represents the house, the home that this husband and wife are going to live in, and it's open on 4 sides for hospitality, okay? And there's no furniture. No one gets to sit down in the chuppah. They stand, right? There's a lack of furniture, reminding that the basis of a Jewish home is the people within it, not the possessions, okay? And in a spiritual sense, you have the covering of the chuppah represents the presence of God over the covenant of marriage. Nice picture. And the word chuppah does show up in the Old Testament. Psalm 19, starting in verse 1. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day, they pour forth speech. Night after night, they reveal knowledge. What reveals knowledge? The heavens. That's what we're talking about here, right? Verse 3. Without speech or language, without a sound to be heard, their voice has gone out into all the earth, their words to the end of the world. In the heavens he has pitched a tent for the sun, like a bridegroom emerging from his chuppah, like a champion rejoicing to run his course. It rises at one end of the heavens and runs its circuit to the other. Nothing is deprived of its warmth. Beautiful, beautiful description there. But it has the chuppah. He has a chuppah over the sun. How nice is that? Joel 2:16 says, gather the people, sanctify the congregation, assemble the elders, gather the children and the nursing infants. Let the bridegroom come out of his room and the bride out of her bridal chamber. That word for bridal chamber there is chuppah. Okay? So it's not a word unfamiliar in the Old Testament. Now, there's a marriage going on under the chuppah, the husband and the wife. Okay, so there's obviously some love involved. Okay, and the word for love is ahava. Aleph, hey, bet, hey, which 1525 adds up to 13. So there is some love between the Vav and the Zayin. The Vav is 6, the Zayin is 7, 13. And we know from Genesis 2 that these two, in a marriage, two become one. And the word for one in Hebrew is echad. Echad is Aleph, Chet, Dalet. There's your Chet in the center. and that adds up also to 13. So the two become one. There's love involved. You see how it all just fits together so beautifully. All right. All right. Here's a, oh my goodness. Here's a very important word that has a chet in it. Anyone guessing? Guessing? Do we have a guess? It's a pei, which is the P sound, the samek, which is the S sound, and the chet. This is the Hebrew word Pesach. And the chet, let's replace it with a door frame, because the frame of a door looks like the letter chet. And inside the house there is the man and the woman, right? The husband and the wife inside the chet. And this word is Pesach. This is Passover. Okay, the Hebrew word. Now, remember what happened at Passover? Well, the first Passover was in Egypt. And we find that in Exodus 12, verse 7. And it says, "And they shall take some of the blood and strike it on the two doorposts and on the lintel of the houses where they eat it." Wow, so there's now a neat picture of the chet. Okay, remember in Egypt, this is the 10 plagues were coming, and then Pharaoh is ignoring 9 of them, and on the 10th one, they're not going to ignore this one. He's not going to ignore this one. And they were to bring a lamb into the house on the 10th day of Nisan, and they were to live with this lamb and make sure it's perfect and unblemished. And on the 14th day of Nisan, they were to sacrifice it with the entire family there. And then the husband, the father, would take and dip a hyssop branch into the blood and strike the doorposts and the top lintel of the house, of the door frame here. And then the death angel would pass over that house and no one would die. And if you didn't have blood on the door, then the death angel would take the firstborn male of all the people in Egypt, of all the livestock, animals. This happened. Okay? Now, how does this apply to, what can we do with this? Well, you know, in the New Testament, you have Yeshua. He made 7 statements where he likened himself to something. And he began these statements with, "I am. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the door. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And I am the true vine." The one I want to point out is the third one there. "I am the door," in John 10:7. Okay, if Yeshua is the door, let's put him in that picture there. There's the door of the chet. Okay, very nice. And you know, there's another place where he did say "I am." He didn't. Actually, 2 other places. Well, when they were looking for him in the garden, and they said, "Who?" He said, "Who are you looking for?" And they said, "We're looking for Jesus of Nazareth." And he said, "I am he." But the one that really got him was when he was talking earlier to the Pharisees, and this is John 8, verse 58. Yeshua said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was born, I am." Boom! When he said that, he's telling the Pharisees that he was around, existing before Abraham, which was thousands of years earlier. And then he ended with, "Before Abraham was born, I am." I am, this is what, when Moses went up on the mountain and the burning bush, and they're going to ask, "What is your name?" And God answered, "Ehyah, Asher Ehyah." I am that I am. His name, Ehyah. This is huge. And Yeshua is claiming to be Ehyah here. Okay? And by the way, God doesn't want us calling him Ehyah, I am. He wants us calling him Yahweh, which is another form of this, which means he is. Right? So we don't get in the mistake of somebody asks me, "Hey John, who's your God?" And I say, "Oh, I am." No. Yahweh, he is. That's what he wants us to answer. But anyway, so Jesus is claiming to be Yah, I am. He's claiming to be Yahweh. And Yahweh, you know, is the Yud, He, Vav, He. Right? Yud is hand, He is revelation, Vav is a nail, He is a revelation. Yud, He, Vav, He. The hand reveals, the nail reveals. So we know Jesus is the door, Jesus is Yahweh, and if you put those in that chet, in that doorway on Passover, that fits very nicely, because John 19:18 says, there they crucified him, and with him 2 other men, one on either side, and Yeshua in between. Yeshua is that door that fits right inside the Passover chet. You see? And when Yeshua is crucified, he's crucified on Passover, thousands of years later from the first Passover. The first Passover freed the Jews from the slavery of Egypt. Yeshua, he's going to free the world from the slavery of sin. Okay? And he fits beautifully into there. Look, his hand, his right hand is the blood on the one post. His left hand, blood on the second post. His crown of thorns brings blood up at the top. And the blood drips down, and his feet were nailed to the cross, and there's blood there. You see that all 4 points hit right where, beautiful, right where they should. He fits so perfectly into that chet, that door frame. Very nice. Woo! Whew. I think we need a drink on that one. Kyrgyzstan orange juice today. Okay. And look at 1 Corinthians 5:7 in the Brit Hadashah. It says, therefore, purge out the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, since you truly are unleavened. For indeed, Christ, Messiah, our Passover, was sacrificed for us. Wow. Wow. All right, speaking of it talk here about the leaven and the unleavened, well, this leads us to the next moed. You know, the very first moed that we're supposed to keep was Passover, right? And Yeshua fulfilled Passover. The second moed that the Jews keep is the moed of unleavened bread, which starts the day after Passover. And what do you do on unleavened bread? Well, you go through your house and you remove everything that has leaven in it, okay? Leaven is yeast, and yeast in the Bible represents sin, okay? And so he wants all the leaven out. This, and you can take it literally, and the Jews do. They go through with a feather and they pull out every crumb out of their house. But what the point is, for 7 days, no leaven. Literally, he doesn't want you eating leaven for those 7 days, so that you mentally will say, you know what, I've got sin in my life, and for the next 7 days, I'm gonna take that sin out. And hopefully at the end of the 7 days, you've broken that bad habit. Okay, kind of the New Year's resolution concept for the Jews, although the Jews had it first. God had it first, as always. Okay, so you got the idea of what is leaven, and he wants us to be unleavened, get the sin out, right? Okay, so look at Exodus 12:39. It talks here about leaven and unleavened. This is when the Jews had to leave Egypt. It says in verse 39, they baked the dough which they had brought out of Egypt into cakes of unleavened bread, for it had not become leavened, since they were driven out of Egypt and could not delay, nor had they prepared any provisions for themselves. The words for leavened bread and unleavened bread. Unleavened bread is matzo, or matzah. You've heard matzah balls, soup, right? Matzo. And the word for leaven is chametz, which, notice, begins with a chet, the letter of the day. Now those two words look very different, matzah and chametz. But you'll be surprised to learn that they are extremely similar. Look at them. Matzah has a mem at the beginning. Chametz has a mem in the center. Matzah has a tzadi in the middle. And chametz has a tzadi at the end. Remember, tzadi is one of those letters that has two forms. And if it shows up as the last letter, it takes on a different form, but it's still a tzadi. And then the third letter of matzah is a hey, while the first letter of chametz is a chet. So really, the only difference between these two words is a hey and a chet. And you can see how similar they are. It's just that tiny little opening in the hay is the only difference between matzah, unleavened bread, and chametz, leavened bread. Okay, so, when the Jews cook or bake matzah bread, you have to take flour and water and you have to mix it and you have to spread it out and you have to get that in the oven, and it's got to get in the oven, and the Jews, they've picked this number, 18 minutes. Because within 18 minutes, flour naturally has leaven in it, and it will start to rise after 18 minutes of festering there, okay, in this lump. So they're very, very, you can watch videos on YouTube of them making matzah for Passover. It's really cool because it's a process, and it's got to be done quick. And as soon as it's done, they have to clean the kitchen to make the second batch because they don't want even a crumb of the previous batch to be on the table or the floor. They get everything out of that room, and then they make the second batch. So 18 minutes or less, it's got to be in the oven to be matzah. If it's 18 minutes and a second, they claim it's starting to rise, and it's chametz, and it can't be used for Passover. All right, so 18 minutes. Why? What's the magic thing there? Well, in Hebrew, 18 is Yud Chet. Yud is 10, Chet is 8. Okay, that's how you'd write 18. And if you write that word, those two letters backwards, you get Chet Yod, which is Chai, which is the word for life. All right? We see this way back in Genesis 2:7. It says, "Then the Lord God formed man of the dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of Chaim, and man became a living being." So Chaim is the plural for Chai, Chai being life, and God breathed into Adam's nostrils the breath of life. And by the way, Chaim, notice it's plural. God breathed lives, Chaim, into Adam, not just one life. He didn't breathe into Chava's nostrils when she was formed. In fact, she wasn't even formed when this happened. Okay? So he breathed how many lives into Adam? Billions and billions. And you and I and everybody got a little piece of that. Okay? So Chai is life. And its value is 18. By the way, a Jewish boy has a bar mitzvah, right? When he's 13 years old, he has to follow all the law once you turn 13 years old. And they have this celebration that he's become a man, and they invite people, and it's kind of a party atmosphere. And if you're bringing a gift to this boy, the Jews bring money in multiples of 18. You give him $18, $36, $72, $180. It's got to be divisible by 18. It's just pointing out, congratulations on your new life. It's a new life. You just turned 13. All right? So, Chai, life, 18. What else? So Adam, he's given a helper. Chava, Eve, we call her. Chava is Chet Vav Hey. Chava adds up to 19, all right? And Genesis 3:20. Now the man called his wife Chava because she was the mother of all living, okay? Chai. There's that word in there. Okay, so she is the mother of all the living. Her name adds up to 19, which is, she's the mother of all living. The living is 18 plus Chava, she's the one. 18 plus 1 is 19. Very nice. Okay, we're talking about 8 being the number for the living, life, new beginning. You know, in the Bible, there are 8 people who were raised from the dead by somebody else in the Bible. I'm not counting Yeshua, who was raised from the dead by God, okay? And I'm not counting the when Yeshua, when he rose from the dead, it says that souls come up out of their grave. Again, those were raised by God. I'm not counting Moses and Elijah in Revelation because they have yet to be raised from the dead. Ones that have already been raised from the dead through the work of somebody that God has ordained to do this. Okay? There's 3 of them in the Old Testament. The widow's son, the Shunammite woman's son, and the man who touched Elisha's bones. Those took place in the Tanakh, Old Testament. And in the New Testament, you have the son of the widow of Nain, the daughter of Jairus, Lazarus, Tabitha in Acts 9:40 was raised by Peter, and Eutychus was sitting on the windowsill and he fell asleep, and when Paul was preaching in Acts 20. So you had 8 people who were given new beginnings, new life in the Bible. Very nice how that works. Okay, so we talked about Chava, the mother of all living. The word for brother is ach. It's an aleph and a chet. Well, aleph is strong, chet is a wall. Your brother is a strong wall of protection for you. Very nice picture there. And a sister is an achot. It's a feminine word, obviously, and so they put the feminine ending, vav, tav, on that. Okay, here's a nice word, the word chen. It's chet, noon. It's a final noon, and this is the word for favor, okay, or grace, whatever, all right? And what's clever about this word is, and this is the first mention of this word in the Bible we're about to show you, if you take the word chen and turn it around, you get noon chet, which is the word Noach. You know, we talk about Noah and the ark. His name is not Noah. It does not end in a hey. It does not end in an H. It ends in a chet. His name was Noach. And in verse 8 of Genesis 6, it says, and Noach found chen, favor, in the eyes of the Lord. Very clever how Noah's name and favor are just backwards of each other, and they're both showed up in this sentence. And this is the first mention of this word, chen, in the Bible. Okay? Another cool word is, which we're talking about Passover, we should have mentioned this earlier, is the word challah. Challah is the special bread that the Jews eat on Shabbat, on the Sabbath. Okay? And this would not be during Passover, because that's only unleavened bread, right? But this is the weekly Sabbath. And I've stayed with Jewish family over a weekend, over this Shabbat, and they will go to the store and they will bake 2 loaves of challah. And they take the 2 loaves and they intertwine them, and it's braided together, and it's just beautiful. Okay? So why do they do 2 loaves? Look at Exodus 16, and this is going to be a little bit of reading here, but it'll be worth it. Then the Lord Yahweh said to Moses, Behold, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. This is when the Jews are out in the wilderness wandering and they wanted food. Each day the people were to go out and gather enough for that day. In this way I will test whether or not they will follow my instructions. Then, on the 6th day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather on the other days. Well, there's telling you why they're bringing in 2 loaves before the Sabbath begins, because he told, bring in twice as much. Okay, that evening quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the layer of dew had evaporated, there were thin flakes on the desert floor, as fine as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they asked one another, what is it? In Hebrew, that's ma-na, for they did not know what it was. So Moses told them, it is the bread that Yahweh has given you to eat. This is what Yahweh has commanded. Each one is to gather as much as he needs. You may take an omer for each person in your tent. So the Israelites did this. Some gathered more and some gathered less. When they measured it by the omer, he who gathered much had no excess, and he who gathered little had no shortfall. Each one gathered as much as he needed to eat. Then Moshe said to them, no one may keep any of it until morning. But they did not listen to Moshe. Some people left part of it until morning, and it became infested with maggots and began to smell. So Moshe was angry with them. Every morning each one gathered as much as was needed, and when the sun grew hot, it melted away. On the 6th day they gathered twice as much food, 2 omers per person. And all the leaders of the congregation came and reported this to Moshe. He told them, this is what the Lord has said. Tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a holy Shabbat to Yahweh. So bake what you want to bake and boil what you want to boil, then set aside whatever remains and keep it until morning. So they set it aside until morning as Moshe had commanded, and it did not smell or contain any maggots. Eat it today, Moshe said, because today is a Shabbat to Yahweh. Today you will not find anything in the field. For 6 days you may gather, but on the 7th day, the Shabbat, it will not be there. Okay, so you got the idea. That, by the way, is a huge miracle, that every day that there was manna and they could gather it, if they tried to store it overnight, it would rot and become stinky and filled with maggots. But on the 6th day, they would gather twice as much. This points to the 2 loaves of bread that they're bringing in. They gather twice as much, and that night it didn't become maggotized. It didn't begin to smell. How clever is this, right? That's a miracle. The whole concept of this manna is a miracle, right? And Yeshua is the manna that come down from heaven. This is just a picture of something that's coming in the future. Exodus 16:27. Yet on the 7th day some of the people went out to gather, but they did not find anything. Then Yahweh said to Moshe, how long will you refuse to keep my commandments and instructions? Understand that Yahweh has given you the Sabbath. Therefore on the 6th day he will give you bread for 2 days. On the 7th day everyone must stay where he is. No one may leave his place. So the people rested on the Shabbat. Okay, let's move on to something else. Exodus 20, starting in verse 4. This is the commandments, right? This is commandment number 2. You shall not make for yourself an idol. For I, the Lord your God, Yahweh Elohim, am a jealous Elohim, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, on the 3rd and the 4th generations of those who hate me, but showing chesed, loving kindness to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments. That word for loving kindness begins with a chet, chesed. Another word that begins with chet is in Daniel 2:17. Then Daniel went to his house and to Then Daniel went to his house and to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his chavarim, his companions, his friends. He had made the thing known. So the word chavarim is friends, companions. And in that word, in that verse, one of his friends is Hananiah. You'll notice that also begins with a chet. There are a lot of names in the Bible that we put the H in front of that's not an H. Okay? Here's one. Havilah. In Genesis 2:11, it says, "Now a river flowed out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it divided and became 4 rivers. The name of the first river is Pishon. It flows around the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold." That word Havilah begins with a chet. It's not ha with a hey, Havilah. Okay, we oftentimes mispronounce that. And by the way, in that Garden of Eden, there were, well, let me read the next verse. It says, okay, the name of the first is Pishon. It flows around the whole land of Havilah where there is gold. Verse 12, the gold of that land is good. The bdellium and onyx stone are there. You know, in Creator Week, 7 times he announced things were good. Day 1, the light was good. Day 3, the land and the seas, coming out of the seas were good. Also on day 3, the vegetation was good. Day 4 was the greater light and lesser light in the stars. They were good. On day 5, he made the fish and the birds. They were good. Day 6, he made the animals. That was good. And on day 6, he looked at everything and saw it was very good. So 7 times he says things were good. What is the 8th thing that God sees to be good? It's gold in Genesis 2:12. That's very interesting, because who would have thought gold would be the next thing in the 8th thing? 8, we're talking about 8, right? Het. But gold is good in God's eyes. You know, we have the verse about, it says, the love of money is the root of all evil. Money's not bad. It's the love of money that's bad. Okay. Also, look at Genesis 3:1. This is the fall of man. It says, "Now the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made." The word serpent in Hebrew is nachash, and it's a nun, a chet, and a shin. There's your chet, and nachash is serpent or snake. All right. It's interesting that word nachash, and you can look at this, I have in more in depth in my video called The Fall of Man. Take a look at that. But nachash is a nun, 50, a chet, 8, and a shin, 300. Which serpent adds up to 358. Okay, so why is that important? Well, the word Mashiach is a mem, 40, a shin, 300, a yod, 10, and a chet, 8. The word Mashiach also adds up to 358. It's interesting that the word serpent and the word Messiah both add up to 358 gematria. And what does the serpent and the Messiah have in common? Remember, the serpent was put on the pole, and the Messiah was put on the cross. There's the tie-in to those two, right? John 3:14, Moses, like as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness. All right, and Genesis 5:27, it says, "So all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died." His name is Methuselah. It ends in a chet, and we always seem to end it with a hey sound. And his name, Methuselah, means his death shall bring. Met is death. Salah means shall bring. What a thing to name your kid. His death shall bring. But if you do the study deep, and in the Noach video, we show you that when Methuselah died, the flood began. Habakkuk, or Habakkuk, as I think the Jews say, begins with a chet. And his famous verse is Habakkuk 2:4. Behold the proud, his soul is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith, but the righteous shall live by faith. This verse caused Martin Luther to leave the Catholic Church. It's all, your salvation is all based on faith. We see that in Genesis 15:6 with Abraham. It said Abraham believed in the Lord, and Yahweh credited it to him as righteousness. Right? That's what gets you to heaven. Belief. Okay? God does not send anybody to hell for their sin. Do you know that? Nobody is sent to hell for their sin. The reason... Oh, look at this. Nobody is sent to hell for their sin. Wow, that's a coincidence. That's a God incidence. What you're sent to hell for is not accepting God's free gift of a perfect, innocent sacrifice to cover your sin. That's what sends you to hell. Keep that in mind. Okay. Another name that we often mispronounce is another Old Testament prophet, Haggai. Okay, or Haggai. It begins with a chet. The word Chag is the Hebrew word for holiday. And you put a yod on the end, it's my holiday, Haggai. All right. The king, Hezekiah, begins with a chet. It comes from the word chazak, to strengthen. All right. And then put a yah on the end. Yah has strengthened. Hezekiah. Very nice. And the Jews, they will say this little phrase, chazak, chazak, vanit chazak. They say this phrase, be strong, and you will be strengthened. Whenever, God told them to read the Torah once a year. So I told you they broke it into 54 parshas, and each week they read a different parsha. And after the first 12 parshas, they've now finished Genesis. And right when they're finishing a book of the Torah, they all stand up and recite this, be strong, and you will be strengthened. Then they start the next book, Exodus. And before they get to the end of Exodus, they stand up and say this again. All right. I love this word. Chakma. Chakma is the Hebrew word for wisdom. It's a chet, kaf, mem, hey. And wisdom. My goodness. You know what? This is what Solomon asked for, right? This is what God said, Solomon, what do you want? You name it, I'm going to give it to you. And Solomon thought, do I want riches? Do I want power? Do I want wine, women, and song? What do I ask for? And he asked for the most perfect thing, that God was so impressed that God gave him everything. Solomon asked for wisdom and discernment. Chakma. I invite you, I entreat you, get on your knees now, tonight, whenever, soon. And God, give me chakma, give me wisdom. It's not something you can get in college. It's not something you can get from a book. It's a gift from God. Chakma. I was smart enough, fortunate, blessed enough in my 20s, I figured this out. And I got on my knees and said, God, chakma, give me chakma and understanding, wisdom and discernment. Please do that. You will not regret. This is a prayer he has to answer, and he loves answering. Okay? And wisdom, what a gift. Look at Proverbs 8. I'm going to just read some of these verses that Solomon writes here about Chokmah. Does not wisdom call and understanding lift up her voice? On top of the heights beside the way where the paths meet, she takes her stand. Beside the gates, at the opening to the city, at the entrance of the doors, she cries out. To you, O men, I call, and my voice is to the sons of men. O naive ones, understand prudence, and O fools, understand Chokmah. Listen, for I will speak noble things, and the opening of my lips will reveal right things. For my mouth will utter truth, and wickedness is an abomination to my lips. All the utterances of my mouth are in righteousness. There is nothing crooked or perverted in them. They are all straightforward to him who understands, and right to those who find knowledge. Take my instruction, and not silver, and knowledge rather than choicest gold. For wisdom is better than jewels, and all desirable things cannot compare with her. I, wisdom, dwell with prudence, and I find knowledge and discretion. The fear of Yahweh is to hate evil, pride and arrogance, and the evil way and the perverted mouth I hate. Counsel is mine, and sound wisdom. I am understanding. Power is mine. By me, wisdom, kings reign, and rulers decree justice. By me, princes rule, and nobles, all who judge rightly. I love those who love me, and those who diligently seek me will find me. Riches and honor are with me, enduring wealth and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, even pure gold, and my yield better than the choicest silver. I walk in the way of righteousness, in the midst of the paths of justice, to endow those who love me with wealth, that I may fill their treasuries. Now, verse 22 of Proverbs 8. Yahweh possessed me at the beginning of his way, before his works of old. From everlasting I was established, from the beginning, from the earliest times of the earth. Wow! So he's saying that from the beginning, Bereshit, from everlasting, Yahweh possessed this wisdom. Okay? Jeremiah 10:12 reconfirms this. It says, it is he who made the earth by his power, who established the world by his Chokmah. And by his understanding he stretched out the heavens. Chokmah, wisdom. Look at the 4 letters. Where do they show up in the alphabet? Well, the Het is the 8th letter. The Kaf is the 11th letter. The Mem is the 13th letter. The He is the 5th letter. The ordinate value of the word Chokmah adds up to 37. 37? There's our 3 and 7 again. If you've been keeping score watching my videos, 3, 7, 37, that is God's magic number. It's just everywhere. Now let's put in the gematria values for wisdom. The Het is still 8, Kaf is 20, Mem is 40, He is 5. The gematria of Chokmah is 73. Again, the 3 and the 7. Wow, there took some wisdom to put this together. And if you think that's cool, remember Genesis 1:1. It says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim va'et haaretz. That verse adds up to 2,701. And if you multiply the ordinate value times the gematria value of wisdom, 37 times 73, you get 2701. It is by his wisdom, by his Chokmah, that he established the world. How beautiful is that? Wow. Whew. Okay. And by the way, wisdom is made up of, is Chokmah, right? Chokmah. The first 2 letters, Het Kaf, spell Chok, which is power. The last 2 letters, Mem He, spell Ma, Ma is what? Remember, mana, what is it? They said in the wilderness, mana, what is it? That's what we'll call it, mana. Okay, what is the name of his son? Ma Shamu. From Proverbs 34, ma is what? Okay, so wisdom is chakma, the power of what? You need to ask. You need to ask, what? What is this? What is that? What is this? And he will answer. That's how you get wisdom. Okay, now, how can we forget this word? The word Messiah, which we Christians call Christ, that's the Greek word, but in Hebrew it's Moshiach. And Mashiach is Mem, Shin, Yod, Chet. It ends in the Chet. All right? By the way, all this is making me thirsty. Now here's one that I know Christians get confused about because there's so many different spellings of it, and even the wrong pronunciation. We call it Hanukkah. Hanukkah, by the way, it is a Jewish holiday. It takes place usually early December. Hanukkah is not, first of all, it's not one of the 7 Moedim that he talks about in Leviticus 23 that he told us to keep while back in Genesis 1:14. Hanukkah is a legitimate holiday, and it's not Hanukkah, it's Hanukkah. It begins with a chet. Chet, Nun, Kaf, Hey. And we can find it throughout the Old Testament. Numbers 7, verse 11. Then the Lord said to Moshe, let them present their offering, 1 liter each day, for the Hanukkah of the altar, for the dedication of the altar. This is when they were dedicating the altar in the tabernacle. So Hanukkah just means dedication. We see it in Nehemiah 12:27. Now at the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought out the Levites from all their places to bring them to Jerusalem so that they might celebrate the Hanukkah. There, it's the exact spelling. Okay? 2 Chronicles 7:5. King Solomon offered a sacrifice of 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. Thus the king and all the people, Hanukkah, dedicated the house of God. This is when they had built the temple, right? Solomon built the temple in there on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And Yeshua himself celebrated Hanukkah. Look in John 10, verse 22 and 23. At that time, the feast of Hanukkah, the feast of dedication, took place at Jerusalem. It was winter, and Yeshua was walking in the temple in the portico of Solomon. So even Yeshua went to Jerusalem to celebrate Hanukkah. Now, the purpose of Hanukkah is to celebrate the dedication of the temple, the altar. I think it's gotten a little bit twisted, and they've come up with this, there was enough oil for 8 days, and then the oil didn't run out. True, not true, I don't know. That's not in the Bible, the Tanakh, okay, that this oil kept lasting. This was during the 400-year period from the last prophet until Yeshua showed up, allegedly happened in there. And they've kind of attributed that definition to why they're celebrating Hanukkah, and they light the Hanukkah, which also begins with a chet, the 9-branch candlestick, okay? And they've incorporated a lot of other traditions that, you know, some are even having Hanukkah bush, like the Jewish equivalent of a Christmas tree. Anyway. So know what Hanukkah is and realize its significance and celebrate, but for the right reason. Okay, Psalm 119. Remember, this is the one that's 176 verses, and every 8 verses is a different begins with a different Hebrew letter. The first 8 all begin with Aleph, right? And the next 8 all begin with Bet, and the next 8 with Gimel. And if you jump down to verse 57 through 64, all of these begin with the letter Chet. And they do talk about his chesed in there, his loving kindness. Psalm 119:64. The earth is full of your chesed, loving kindness. O Lord, teach me your statutes. We've said that the Chet represents, its picture, ancient picture, is a wall, right? And John 10:1, Yeshua said, truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter by the door into the fold of the sheep, but climbs up some other way, he is a thief and a robber. Commandment 8, back in Exodus 20:15, you shall not steal. You can remember which commandment is which. 8, Chet. Chet is a wall. Wall keeps people from stealing. 8th commandment, you shall not steal. A nice little mnemonic device there to help you remember. Okay, so that's going to kind of wind up. Oh no, it's not. You know what? This is not a bonus. This is just a clever thing that at the last minute I remember thinking last night. I put this in here. But the letter Het is followed by the Tet. And if you notice, one of them is kind of just upside down of the other. Okay? And these two, the Het is a wall, the Tet is a coiled snake. These two letters together spell the word Chata with the Aleph on the end, which is sin. Okay? And if you go through the sons of Jacob, the sons of Israel, the 12 tribes, their names do not contain a Het or a Tet. So I'm guessing he does not want any sin in these tribes. Now that doesn't mean that no sin entered these tribes, but he did not put those two letters in, showing that there is no, that he didn't want sin in those boys. Okay? Now, just to be fair, there's also two other letters that don't show up who are next to each other, the Tzadi and the Kuf. The Tzadi represents righteousness, the Kuf, Tzaddik, righteousness, and the Kuf represents Kodesh, holiness. So I'm sure he wanted righteousness and holiness in the tribes, but they ended up having Chata in there also. So just, that's a little, those are the only 4 letters that aren't in this son's names. Okay, so now that concludes our talk on Het. Thank you so much for watching. To God be the glory, to God be the honor, to God be the praise. We will see you back here soon. God bless. Bye-bye. Wait! We have a bonus, and let me tell you, this one is so cool. Okay, Het represents 8. And 8, it's the first cubic number. 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. Okay, yeah, I got that. Besides 1, okay? And if you do 2 times 2 times 2, you get 8, a cubic number. It forms a cube. Every side is 2 units long, okay? Now, what's special about that? Well, in the tabernacle complex, you had the curtains all the way around. Each of the curtains were hung with vav, nails, hooks, okay? There was one way in. When you entered, there was the brazen altar where you did the sacrifice. Then there was the laver, which was the big round body of water where the priest would bathe before he actually entered into the tabernacle. When you entered into the tabernacle, you had the menorah to the left. You had the table of showbread to the right with 12 loaves of bread. Straight ahead, you had the altar of incense. Then you had the veil. And that first area was called the holy place. Once a year, the high priest could go behind the veil into the Holy of Holies. And in the Holy of Holies, there was the Ark of the Covenant. And on top of the Ark was the mercy seat, where once a year, the high priest would pour the blood, okay, of the sacrificial animal, and God would forgive the sins of Israel for the year. Notice, in the whole complex, there were 7, no surprise, 7 pieces of furniture. A brazen altar, a laver, menorah, table of showbread, altar of incense, Ark of the Covenant, and a mercy seat. Okay, and the veil separated the holy place from the Holy of Holies. Well, the Holy of Holies, its dimensions were 10 by 10 by 10. It was a cube where Yahweh resided. Got it? That was in the tabernacle. When years later, when Solomon built the temple, the permanent structure on the Har Beit, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, it was a much bigger complex. And now the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant was, its dimensions were 20 by 20 by 20. It was also a cube where Yahweh resided in the temple. Ah, now that's interesting. Yahweh seems to like to reside in a cube. Okay? In fact, if you jump ahead to Revelation 21, verse 2, it says, "And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, having been prepared as a bride, having been adorned for her husband. And the city lies 4 square, and its length the same as also the width. And he measured the city with a reed as 12,000 stadia. The length and the breadth and the height of it are equal." That then is verse 16. So when Yeshua comes back and he establishes his reign over the planet, there's going to be a new Jerusalem that comes down out of the sky, which is 12,000 by 12,000 by 12,000. It's a cube. He's going to rule and reign from Jerusalem, from this new city, the new Jerusalem. So again, you have Yahweh residing, ruling, and reigning from a cube, a very big cube, 12,000 stadia. I've heard different, what's 12,000 stadia? I've heard it's 1,500 miles by 1,500 miles by 1,500 miles. I don't know what a stadia is, but that seems to be the consensus. That's a pretty big city that's coming down out. But the point is, it is a cube, okay? And look at Revelation 7:17. "For the Lamb who is in the midst of the throne will shepherd them and lead them to living fountains of water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes." The Lamb is going to shepherd us to living. What's living? Living is chai, right? Chaim, chai, is the chet involved, okay? And he is going to shepherd us because we are the dumb sheep. You know, a lot of times you will see Jews wearing a necklace and they will have on it the Hebrew word chai. It's a chet and a yod. Okay? You know what? I've put a chet and a yod here, a piece of jewelry looking thing. You know what that looks like to me? That chet and yod looks like a lamb. That lamb is what gives us life. The Lamb of God who took away the sin of the world. Wow. How nice is that? Okay. There it is. Revelation 21, verse 25 starting. "In the daytime, for there will be no night there, its gates will never be closed, and they will bring the glory and honor of the nations into it. And nothing unclean, and no one who practices abomination and lying shall ever come into it. but only those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of Chai, life. You see how it's all interconnected. How beautiful, right? And that Yahweh is associated with a cube and residing in a cube. Very nice. And by the way, if you take a cube and open it up, notice there are 6 faces in a cube. I got 6. There are 12 edges in a cube. There are 8 vertices, 8 corners in a cube. So if you take all the parts of a cube and add them together, you get 26. Yahweh, Yud He Vav He, 26. God bless. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.